My phone would not stop ringing. Unknown numbers, messages from people I had never met, a single question repeating itself. Is this you in these photos? Naked. Intimate pictures from when I was 30 years younger, images I thought existed only between me and the man I trusted. Raúl, the man I'd spent 30 years of my life with, had posted them in a men's group after an argument. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the phone. On the screen, one of those old photos looked back at me young, exposed, helpless in a way that made my stomach drop. At 56, I had never imagined my dignity would be torn apart by the man who swore he'd love me. It was my nephew Fernando who told me. He stood in my doorway holding the phone like it burned him, unable to meet my eyes. Tia Lucía, I'm so sorry. I thought you should know. The air went heavy. Breathing hurt. Something inside me, something that had slept for decades, woke up like a volcano. He would not recognize me in my fury. That scene I just described didn't come out of nowhere. To understand why it cut so deep, you need to know who I am. My name is Lucía Ramirez. I live in Guadalajara in the same house where we raised our 2 children and where, some Sundays, the house fills with the small chaos of grandchildren. It is a modest house on a quiet street. The paint peels a little at the corner, and the jasmine by the gate smells stronger in the evenings. I have been a nurse for 25 years. I learned to measure a pulse by touch and to fold a sheet so it looked like new. I learned how to hold a hand and say nothing while the heart beneath it worried. I was not born accustomed to being invisible. I left my medical studies when I became pregnant with our first child. I remember the classroom light, the stack of textbooks I never finished, and the soft, stubborn way Raúl convinced me that raising a family was the right path. I believed him. I saved every peso I could, penny by penny, so our children could go to university. I gave up shifts, nights out with friends, small pleasures. I embroidered linens while listening to a radio show about politics I never had time to follow. I learned to cook for many and to make a salary stretch like elastic. I stayed silent, but I didn't forget. There were sacrifices that no one applauded. I worked double shifts when Raúl's little business failed. I covered the bills when his investments evaporated like mist. I swallowed explanations, adjusted budgets, and rearranged the grocery list without complaining out loud. When he came home late smelling of perfume that wasn't mine, I forgave the silence. When he spent the savings on projects that never launched, I covered for him. I believed steadiness mattered more than pride. Stability for our children seemed worth any personal quiet. There is a neighborhood rhythm to this kind of life. Neighbors see your door, the way it sticks in the humidity, the way you sweep the steps at 7 every morning. Faces become familiar. We watched each other's children grow, we shared casseroles and condolences. Respect and duty were the code. I tried to live by that code. I thought being the pillar meant holding things up without complaint. It felt noble. It felt, for many years, necessary. But there is a line between being the pillar and being a cage. The day my photos went out, that line vanished under rubble. Suddenly everything I had offered as proof of care looked like proof I had been owned. The betrayal wasn't only that he shared the images. It was that he called me property in a message, as if a person's body and history could be a thing in someone else's hand. I will tell you small things about our house. The kitchen window faces east. Before dawn it catches the first airplane lights like tiny promises. The living room lamp has a burn mark on the shade from an incense we used to light during Lent. There is a narrow hall where the family photos hang, a boy with a crooked tooth, a daughter with her graduation sash, us at a wedding with the world still wide. Those photos are time. They are also evidence of trust. I thought trust meant privacy. One image stands in my mind like a secret I never shared: the bedroom door, the old wooden door with its paint nicked from years of being opened and closed. For decades, that door felt private. It was the door behind which we had our vows, our arguments, our quiet mornings. A sliver of light would sometimes slip under it in the afternoon when he napped. That sliver is an image I will carry now, because a sliver is all privacy needs to be pierced. The door was between ajar and closed, and that tiny gap says everything about how easily what is private becomes public. I stayed silent, but I didn't forget. I was raised to believe in respect, loyalty, and dignity. These words shaped the way I spoke and chose my battles. Dignity, above all, was the line I drew inwardly. My mother used to say that a woman keeps the home steady as a lighthouse. I took those lessons as armor. They also became chains. I swallowed disappointments and kept the home steady, and in return I asked for respect and a life built on mutual care. I never imagined the person beside me could reduce those years to a joke. There were small moments that should have been warnings. He grew more secretive with his phone. He laughed at things alone in the garage. He began to reminisce about my body in ways that felt less loving and more possessive. "You were a goddess, Lucía," he'd say, eyes sliding away. "Everyone wanted you." He said it as if he had kept a museum of me, curated in his memory. Once, asking if I would let him take new private photos, he used the language of nostalgia as a tool. I refused. The refusal left a scratch in the surface of how he saw me. I thought it was a passing thing. I thought I could forgive one request. I was wrong. I called my friend Irene the day I found out. She came like a hand thrown into a dark pool. Irene knew the ups and downs. She had been there at births and funerals, always with a bag big enough to hold any emergency. When I told her, she didn't gasp or say anything that would make me feel foolish. She listened, then she said in a voice that did not tremble, "This is not just bad taste. It's a crime in many places. We need to gather things. We need to prepare." Her words steadied me more than I expected. I called a lawyer recommended by a colleague, but I did it quietly. I did not tell Raúl. I made the first appointment on a Tuesday at 10 a.m., in a small office with plants that needed water and a reception lady who asked if I preferred coffee with milk. The lawyer spoke clearly: diffusion of intimate images without consent is a crime. In a divorce, it is powerfully used. "You have proof," she said. "Don't erase a thing. Save everything. Open a private bank account. Prepare quietly." Her tone was pragmatic. My hands were shaking, but the words felt like scaffolding. I stayed silent, but I didn't forget. Finance was practical. For years, I had managed the household bills. I knew exactly how money moved between accounts. We were not wealthy. There were always choices to be made: school fees, repairs, birthdays. I opened a separate account under my name and moved what belonged to me, my earnings, small savings tucked away after night shifts and overtime. I did it without drama. It felt like reclaiming a small piece of myself. I left his money untouched. I wanted no claim to be construed as greed. I simply wanted independence. At home I practiced appearing calm. I cooked the meals I had always made: child's rellenos, rice with a cilantro squeeze, frijoles simmered slowly. I put the plates on the table. I laughed when a joke landed. I let Raúl think nothing had changed. Inside, my heart thrummed an unfamiliar current. I was a woman thinking in increments of precautions: copies of messages in email, printed receipts, notes of dates and times. I kept a small folder under the sink, in a place no one would expect a bundle of evidence wrapped in a grocery bag. I asked for privacy and respect, and they offered what they could. I stayed silent, but I didn't forget. There was another meeting I arranged, Alejandro, one of Raúl's oldest friends. He had the look of a man who had been uncomfortable for a long time. We met in a cafe across town. Alejandro's eyes avoided mine at first, then he sighed and said, "I tried to stop him. I told him it was wrong." His voice was thick with shame. I asked the one question that had been burning me, "Is this the first time?" He hesitated, then said, "No. He's shown things before. He bragged about them." The confession was a blade. I felt the years of being reduced to gossip and trophies suddenly explained but not excused. That night I wrote everything down. I printed the screenshots, the group messages, the comments. I typed dates and names into a document. I revised it until the words were crisp. I wrote with a calm I did not feel. Then I folded the paper and placed it in an envelope. The envelope was yellow and old, the same kind we used years ago for receipts. Holding that envelope felt like holding a key. I tucked it into my purse and slept a little. The next morning I called and reserved a table at the restaurant where Raúl had once asked me to marry him. The irony tasted bitter and crisp in my mouth like lemon. I told the lawyer the date, and she told me to be ready but patient. Patience was a new skill for someone who had been mostly silent. I stayed silent, but I didn't forget. I walked through my house in the days that followed like a woman in a familiar film that now had a different script. The scent of soap and boiled coffee was the same. The clock in the hall still ticked. The sliver of light under the bedroom door still appeared every afternoon. But the sliver had a new meaning. The house no longer sheltered a mutual private life. It harbored a secret that belonged to me alone until I decided otherwise. I remember closing a drawer and feeling how final small closures can be. I folded a sweater I had loved for years and placed it in a box labeled with my name. It felt like naming a territory I had always thought we shared. I packed quietly, methodically, like a nurse preparing a field kit. Each fold was an act of reclaiming. And then I waited. The waiting was sharper than I expected. Quiet did not soothe. It amplified the smallest noise, the buzz of my phone, a car on the street, Raúl's laugh down the hall. I rehearsed how I would speak, what I would show. The patience was not weakness, it was a plan. But the Sunday came that would make waiting impossible. The Sunday was ordinary and too full at once. The house smelled of frying chili and coffee. I had woken early, as I always do, to start the food. The pots lined the counter like soldiers, each one carrying a task: beans simmering, rice steaming, chiles roasting until their skin blackened and curled. The tablecloth was the one we used for celebrations. The lace had been mended by my mother. Sunlight came through the kitchen window in a long warm bar, painting the dish towels with light. People arrived in a slow tide. Miguel with his wife Gabriela and the twins' legs and mouths sticky with the leftover cake they had smuggled at home. Elena with Ricardo and their new baby, a small, solemn thing that slept most of the visit and made everyone bend closer as if proximity could transfer care. The house filled with laughter and little fights over toys. It was life as I knew it, noisy, imperfect, loving. I moved from stove to serving bowl. My hands worked on autopilot. I checked the oven, wiped counters, tasted the sauce, adjusted salt. The domestic rhythm steadied me. Raúl was odd that day in a way that prickled under the surface. He was unusually helpful, poured drinks, carried plates, made faces at the twins. He laughed easily, maybe too easily. At one moment he looked at me with an expression that could have been tenderness, and for a flicker I felt seen. "Sit, Lucía," he said when he noticed me standing. "I'll take care of the plates." I hesitated and then took the seat like a woman taking a small mercy. The look he gave as he placed a napkin at my lap did not settle. It hovered between memory and ownership. I could not tell which. I stayed silent, but I didn't forget. I watched them all, Miguel with his focused frown, Gabriela half laughing, Elena cradling the baby through the blur of steam rising from the platters. Miguel, like his father, often read the room through his phone. That afternoon he was checking messages under the table, thumbs moving fast. Gabriela tried to corral the twins into sitting long enough to eat. Elena whispered something into Ricardo's ear and he leaned down and kissed her temple. Their small domestic motions were a balm. They were also a reminder of all the things I had held steady to make possible. After dessert, when the twins had been coaxed into nap time and the baby slumbered in Elena's arms, Raúl disappeared into the hall closet. Later he returned carrying an old photo album. "Do you remember these?" he asked, opening it with a sheltered smile. The album smelled of dust and time. There were pictures of our early years, grainy Polaroids of beaches and young faces, the teeth-bared grins of the folks we used to be. He leafed through them slowly, as if craving the past. I watched the motion of his fingers sliding over images that, until then, I believed held only memory and tenderness. Then he pulled a small yellow envelope from the back of the album and held it like a secret. The envelope was the kind I had used for receipts and notes. Its edges were softened by years. He said, "I keep my treasures here," and slid it into his pocket when I reached for it. His hand closed over it as though he were protecting something precious. He kissed my forehead before going to bed that night. The kiss was light, automatic, family-made. I went to sleep with a small unease lodged in my stomach, like a pebble under the tongue. There were other things that crept in like small bees. A neighbor passing by the front gate called out casually about how modern families are, and laughed as if the word modern was a shield for every hurt. A cousin, in conversation that afternoon, made an offhand remark about husbands and little jokes men tell their friends. They sounded like the ordinary things people say to smooth life, but each one landed like a tiny stone. Those microaggressions collected into a pool of shame I did not deserve. Kalei, mas no esqueci. I stayed silent, but I didn't forget. After everyone left and the house sighed into the quiet that comes after many voices, I cleaned in a kind of daze. Plates in the sink. Cups in the rack. I noticed the album on the coffee table and, because something in me had finally refused to be an accessory to my own erasure, I reached for it. The album lay heavier than memory should. The envelope was not where he had slid it back into the album. Instead, it was on top of the pages like a note left by someone who had misremembered where they put a thing. I froze. My fingers wanted to close the book and pretend. They did not. I picked up the yellow envelope. It was light. My heart pounded. I stayed silent, but I didn't forget. Inside the envelope were photographs. Not new ones, but those old intimate pictures we had taken long ago on our honeymoon, at our 10th anniversary, when we believed we would be the only guardians of images like those. My hand trembled as I spread them on the coffee table. The images felt both familiar and violated, like someone had taken a private room and hung it in a public park. I sat down on the couch and the floor seemed far away. I remember the way the lights softened at the window. For a moment, I could only see my hands. A sound from the garage made me look up. I heard his laugh in there, low and easy. The house was not empty of him, and yet the man who lived in it seemed suddenly foreign. I held the photos like evidence and my body reacted the way it always does with shock, a cold wave, then the stomach, then silence. I collected myself and took pictures of the photos with my phone. I sent copies to my email. I breathed like someone resuscitating memory into proof. The envelope in the drawer felt like a heart beneath the floorboards. I closed the drawer and went to bed. My pillow smelled like soap and dust and the small habit of sleeping beside someone who had been a companion for 30 years. I lay awake with the phone on the bedside table. I could hear Raúl breathing on the other side of the door, steady, ordinary, villainous in a way I never thought he'd be. I watched the thin strip of light under the bedroom door and I understood that privacy had been violated and would now be reclaimed in daylight. I stayed silent, but I didn't forget. In the morning I called the lawyer. I told her, simply, that I was ready. My voice was steady. The end of the waiting made the world narrow and bright. I had a place to go that day, paper to present, and a plan laid out like a map. When I hung up, I looked at myself in the hallway mirror. The woman who looked back was angry but not unhinged. Her jaw set. Her hands were the same hands I used to hold babies and sutures and grief. They were hands that now held evidence. I took a deep breath and walked out the door. The envelope in the drawer waited like a loaded sentence. And then, when I opened the attic closet to get something else, I found a box I had never seen before. Something in the attic smelled like old paper and winter dust. I had gone up for a folding step stool, for a box of bulbs, for anything to justify opening that closet, and my hand closed around a box I had never seen before. It was a cheap cardboard box, taped at the seams, the kind of box you think disappears in a move and then resurfaces like a secret. My fingers left small smudges on the surface as I opened it. Inside were things that felt private enough to belong to the dark corners of someone's memory. A stack of cassette tapes, a yellowing newspaper clipping about a job he once had, ticket stubs to a movie we'd laughed at, and, tucked under a cloth, an envelope with my name on it. The handwriting was his, fast, small, a kind of shorthand that had once been intimate. Now it looked possessive. I held the envelope and it felt heavier than its size allowed. Something in the house shifted, the hum of the refrigerator, a distant radio, the river of light across the hallway, and I felt the ledger of years tilt under my feet. There are small betrayals you can pretend were clumsy gestures, and there are betrayals that reorient the whole room. This envelope lived in the second category. I did not open it then. I slid the box back into the closet like a cautious animal returning to its den. I carried the envelope downstairs in the crook of my elbow, as if it were an injured bird I had to shelter until I knew what to do. He was in the garden, his back bent over a rosemary bush, elbows dirty, humming as if he had no narrative that involved deception. When he saw me, he straightened and smiled, the kind of smile that used to mean everything. Now it felt like an actor's cue. "Lovely day," he said, and I answered as if the words were a meal I could not refuse. The house seemed louder with small things during those days. Plates clinked, the infants' toys squeaked, a neighbor's radio bled a song about highways and leaving. When the grandchildren left and the rooms emptied, the quiet returned with a brittle edge, the kind of quiet that listens. Micro scene number 1, the receipts. I was looking for a bottle of cough syrup in his desk when a folded paper slipped from between accounting reports. It was a hotel receipt, stamped and neat, dated 2 Wednesdays before, the name of the room service scrawled alongside a late checkout. I rehearsed explanations in my head like prayers: meeting, overtime, paperwork. I told myself not to look for a wound because sometimes a bruise is only a bruise. I kept the receipt in my pocket until the heat of my body made the ink smell of other people's cologne. When he asked why I was quiet, I lied with the old, familiar politeness. "I'm tired," I said. The words were both truth and camouflage. Micro scene number 2, the phone in the garage. One evening I heard his laugh from the garage, a low, pleased sound the way men make when they are showing each other something small and private, like a shared card trick. "Yeah, I've got material from when she was younger," I heard him say, casual as the knock of rain. She has no idea. It's classic. The word material landed like a hard stone in my hands. My heart tried to organize itself around the noise, denial, then curiosity, then a slow, crystalline anger. I opened the garage door as if by accident and peered through the slat of shade. Raúl's face was lit by the blue of the phone screen, the way a face gets smaller under a small light, reduced to angles and the shadow of a smile. He had his back to me and did not notice. From where I stood, he looked ridiculous and menacing at once. I went back inside and washed my hands with such vigor the skin stung. I kept saying to myself that I was imagining it, that perhaps the phrase had meant something else. But a phrase repeated in the dark has a way of making a pattern where none was intended. Micro scene number 3, the neighbor's joke. Mrs. Ortega from next door dropped by with a lemon pie, the kind she always brings when a family member is unwell or when celebratory gossip is needed. She set the pie on the counter and chuckled, leaning in with that small-town conspiratorial air. Husbands, eh? They think they're still 20, she said and laughed like a bell. You know how men are. Her voice was casual, but her eyes flicked to mine like someone checking whether a plate is cracked. I smiled because that's what one does when served a pie and a rumor at the same time. After she left, I found myself replaying the moment. Was it probable that every man out there had tails? Yes. Was it probable that every tale involved me? No. But the repetition of those jests, the oh-so-light comments at the gate and over the hedge, formed a net that began to close. I started to notice his small habit, the rapid flip of the phone when I passed, the quick pocketing of the device like a magician's sleight. He would come to bed with the smell of a cafe or a scent that was not mine and kiss my forehead like someone tucking in a relic. I felt strange, betrayed, of course, but also absurdly foolish for having believed in the altar of privacy. I found other things in odd places. A sticky note in the glove compartment with a man's name I did not know. A hair tie that did not belong to me jammed between the pages of his accounting book. A message in his trash can half swallowed by coffee grounds. Each small thing was a rumor, and rumors stitch into fact if left unstitched. I practiced being ordinary to apprentices myself to something, how to move like a woman who does not know. I made the bed, folded the napkins, whispered to the sleeping house 1,000 small lies about how everything was fine. But the envelope in the attic and the receipt in my pocket hummed under my skin with an electricity that would not die. There were other scenes that did not amount to proof but added weight. My daughter Elena watched him once at breakfast and then asked, "Is everything okay with you too?" with the casual cruelty of a child learning to shield her complications. Miguel, practical as always, sent a text asking if I needed something from the store. His brevity was both annoyance and armor. Their ways of stepping off center stage felt like protection and like abandonment at the same time. Through the next few days I kept a small ledger in my head. Times he left, names he said, temperatures of his touches. The ledger was useless in daylight. It only sang after midnight when the house folded in on itself and I could no longer pretend to cook for people I could not trust. There is a particular silence that comes before the confrontation you have rehearsed 1,000 times. It is not the silence of peace, but the silence of a room holding its breath. I sat in that silence until the air tasted metallic in my mouth. One afternoon I opened the attic closet again. This time I carried a small flashlight in my hand, an absurd act of preparedness. The box I had found before sat where I had left it, unassuming like a sleeping animal. The envelope with my name still rested inside, solid and inscrutable. My hands were steadier than my pulse wanted me to believe. I peeled the flap back and slid a finger beneath the paper. There were photographs. Not new ones, older, washed-out images of a younger me laughing at a cafe, me with salt in my hair, me with an arm thrown over Raúl's shoulder on some long-ago beach. There were other things too, a string of Polaroids, a note in his hand about memories saved. The photographs were. I slid my hand out and it felt like a betrayal at first touch, a hand on a husband's phone, and a liberation an instant later. The screen lit with the blue of his past life as if it had been waiting for me to decide. I will not tell you I was not shaking. I will tell you I was precise. I did not scroll greedily, I did not fling myself into every folder. I moved like a nurse on rounds, methodical, calm, efficient. I opened the messages, and the light of the screen painted my face with the wash of things I had to see. There it was, a group with a name that sounded like a joke at first, Los Lobos del 78, and then a series of photos, and then a caption that made the room tilt. Here's my wife when she was worth looking at, it said. The words were small on the screen and the meaning larger than the house. 5 images attached. Old ones. My body exposed to people I had never chosen. I did not make a sound. My world condensed into the rectangle of that phone and then shuddered outward into all the blank spaces I had allowed to keep existing. This was not a suspicion anymore, it was a document. This was a deliberate exposure. I stayed silent, but I didn't forget. I slid the phone back onto the table like a thing that could still be ordinary, and I breathed until the house returned to its normal noises. Outside, a dog barked, a car passed, the jasmine by the gate thought the night kind. I closed my eyes and imagined the next morning. I knew I could not keep living like this, pretending privacy, pretending ignorance. But first, I had to figure out how to hold these pieces without breaking them. I would open the file again. I would not act on anger, I would act on evidence. The envelope in the attic and the receipts and the blue light of the phone had aligned into a cold, undeniable line. And at the end of that line waited the rest of the truth. I was about to follow it. I reached for the phone again with hands that felt both foreign and familiar. The screen woke and the group was still there, a thumbprint of cruelty and pride. Names blinked in a row, some known, some anonymous. The timestamp glared at me like an accusation. Here's my wife when she was worth looking at, the post read, and under it, the images opened like a trap. They were photographs from years ago, from our honeymoon, from our 10th anniversary, moments I had thought were sealed between us. There is a particular violence to seeing your private moments reposted by the person who promised them sanctuary. I looked at each photo the way you might look at a photograph of a house you lived in and then watched someone burn. There was a softness in the way I had once posed, there was betrayal in the way those images were reshuffled into spectacle. My stomach turned, not because of vanity but because something that had been entrusted to one person had been turned into a public commodity. Messages followed, small and quick and sterile as knives. Does she still go like that? One said. Oldies still do it for me, another wrote, the emoji like a laugh track in a cruel sitcom. My reaction was physical at first. I went to the sink and retched, the world narrowing to the sound of my own hands in cold water. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman I recognized only as damage and as resilience in equal measure. I photographed the messages with my phone, making copies like a clerk making records, because evidence needs replication. I emailed the screenshots to myself, set up backups on 2 separate drives, and sent a copy to a secure folder in cloud storage I had never used for anything but recipes. The nurse in me cataloged each step: gather, preserve, label, store. There was a voice in the thread I knew would be important: Alejandro. He had written, delete this, man. This is your wife. The plea was there like a small, late flare. Raúl's response was a bruise of a laugh and 3 words, it's my property, and an emoji as if to say the hurt was inconsequential. That word property is the kind of language that erases a person into a thing. Hearing it used for me was like someone taking an eraser to the years we had shared and rubbing them into dust. I felt the air thinning, it was not simply betrayal anymore. It was an ideological theft, myself, defined by someone else. I did not take the phone to bed. I left it on the table because I needed to step away and gather a plan. Going to bed with that image in my head felt like sleeping on a wound that would swell in the night. After the children left, after I had done what women are taught to do in order to keep a house standing, washed, scrubbed, prepared tea, I sat down and wrote. I wrote dates and times and quotes and names. My handwriting, usually neat, shook in places. The page filled with the forensic work of someone who knows that memory alone is a soft thing and the world sometimes requires harder proof. There was a particular image that lodged in my throat, a photograph of me laughing with my hair in a towel, the same towel that later dried our children, later dried our sins. To them it was a joke or a trophy, to me it was a record of a younger woman who trusted. I named the feeling that came with it, violation, with a side of profound disbelief. I called my friend Irene that afternoon. I had not told her everything. The rightness of secrecy is strange. You want allies, but you also want strategy. When she picked up, her voice was bright with the kind of compassion that had no time for performances. Lucía, tell me, she said. She listened like a doctor listening for a tempering bruise. I told her. I did not spare the words. I let them be hard. You can go to the police, she said. She did not say it like a threat or a bravado, she said it like someone offering a ladder. We will go with you. We will make copies. We will not let them tell you you're overreacting. There is relief in being heard carefully. But there is also a new fear what being heard mobilizes. If you travel from private suffering to public action, you risk the public's vocabulary. You risk people saying, "Why now?" or "at your age," as if timing is a moral failing. I started making practical lists: lawyer, bank, backup, locations where the photos had been shared. I took screenshots of the group thread, noted the times, the names of people who had commented. I went to the computer and printed the images and messages in black and white because a judge likes a simple monochrome truth. The prints sat on my kitchen table like calling cards. Each one was a small coffin built of pixels and years. I walked to the front window and watched the street. Neighbors passed with the routines of their lives. A man walked a dog, a child chased a ball. The ordinary made the betrayal feel like a stain on a clean shirt. I thought of my mother's advice: keep your dignity. I thought of the cost of that dignity in a world where men can call women property. The next morning I confronted a smaller test before the big conversation, the family group on our phone. A message from Raúl had been sent earlier that week to a cousin, a joke. I showed it to Elena as if I were pointing to a bruise. She read it with the quick, assessing look of a daughter scanning for what must be true. "Mom," she said softly, "this is wrong." She did not cry. She did not need to. The fact of it landed between us like a new furniture. I thought about my sons and daughters, about the way they might carry our history. I did not want my children to think I had asked for this humiliation. I wanted them to know they had a parent who could say no and still live. There are few lessons as cruel and as necessary as that you can lose something and keep yourself intact. I called the lawyer recommended by Irene. She was a woman with quick hands and a voice that felt like a desk set in a courtroom. She listened, asked for copies of everything, advised on the preservation of electronic evidence. "This is diffusion of intimate images," she said plainly. "It's criminal in many places. We will prepare for divorce and keep the record for civil claims." Her competence felt like a window opening. "Don't respond," she said at the end. "Let them speak if they need to give you proof. You gather and wait." I took the advice the way you take medicine, grudgingly, because you know it will work but it tastes of restraint. In the following days the house became a courthouse of tiny moves. I opened a private bank account, transferred my savings, carefully noting amounts and dates. I printed everything again and put a copy in an envelope addressed to myself, then slipped another copy to Irene for safekeeping. My hands shook as I wrote the date on the front of the document folder. I felt like someone preserving a species, careful, tender, as if I could keep a small animal safe inside paper. At night I practiced my words in the mirror. Not for a speech, but for the economy of truth. I would not scream or cry theatrically, I would state facts. Facts do not bark, they sit and weigh. A judge understands facts. A family understands them friction by friction. When I finally sat across from him in the restaurant, the place where he had once asked me to marry him, I let the quiet do its work first. The arrangement of plates, the dim light, the hum of other people's lives, the scene was ordinary, like a stage set. He noticed the change in me and smiled with someone's nostalgia. He did not understand the instrument he had given me. I showed him the screenshots. I placed them on the table like a sequence of papers that, when read in order, told a life. He tried to say it was nothing. He tried to explain it away. His hands moved as if to take mine. I let my hand remain withdrawn. Delete it, Alejandro had said once. I had tried that in my mind to delete the humiliation with one command. But deletion does not erase the fact that a person decided you were property. Deletion does not return dignity. He babbled apologies, then threats, then attempts at minimization. We can fix this, he said. It was stupid. His eyes searched for the old mercy on my face. The mercy was gone. I spoke of law and record and the cost of humiliation. I told him he had a choice, go quietly or be forced by evidence into exposure. The irony hung in the air like a bitter perfume. When I left the restaurant, I felt like a woman stepping off a precipice who was not quite sure if she would fall or fly. But the steps I took after were small and steady, a lawyer's appointment, a bank transfer, a call to Miguel to ask for discretion. Each action rang like a bell. Each one announced that I would not be erased. I lay awake then, in a house that now held more than its share of truth. The phone's blue light still glowed in the corner of my awareness. It was both weapon and proof. I told myself that what had been done to me would be turned into a record of accountability. I kept repeating a small sentence to myself until it became a mantra, a hinge: I will not be someone's property. It felt like an old prayer rediscovered and made particular to the way my life had been scraped. I stayed silent, but I didn't forget. The next day would require courage measured in paper and evidence. But tonight the record sat, and I slept in the small, dangerous comfort of evidence preserved. And in the morning I would begin to say the words of the law out loud, to let them take shape outside my head. I was ready to take the steps that made a rumor a record. The nights after the discovery stretched long and thin. Sleep came in small, scattered visits drifting in and out as if the house itself was unsure whether to forgive or keep watch. My hands remembered the order of care long before my heart could. I told myself to move slowly. I made tea even when I could not drink it. I'd stand at the sink and rinse a pot and feel the cool water like a small anchor. These quotidian motions kept me from untethering completely. There were moments of pure, unfiltered memory that would arrive like tides. I remembered the day he took those photos, the persuasion thinly veiled as romance. For us, he had said, eyes steady. I had been young and trusting and knew at the sort of bargaining that lives in relationships. Now those images lived elsewhere in a group of men laughing at my body as an amusement. I thought of the nights I had worked double shifts as a nurse to keep the household afloat. I thought about the paychecks I had folded and tucked into envelopes and the lunches I had packed for children who thought my sacrifice was simply the air they breathed. I thought of the graduations, the evenings sitting alone while others slept, the times I swallowed a question because it would have meant starting an argument in front of the children. Those trades comfort for sacrifice, silence for peace had been made repeatedly, not as bargains but as doctrines. I had believed stability was worth erosion. I had believed that dignity could be protected by avoiding storms. But, as I learned, silence does not always conserve dignity. Sometimes it erodes it slowly into a shadow. In the small hours, the house itself became a patient to be tended. I would walk from room to room, touching the corners like a nurse checking a pulse. The family photos in the hallway looked different now. In the frames were faces I loved and a man who had crossed a line. The photographs had once been a record of trust. Now they were proof that trust could be violated. I began to map the practical consequences in my mind. What would this mean for the children? How would it change our social ties? Would people take his side because his jokes had always been louder than my complaints? These were not rhetorical questions. They were logistics to be managed. There were small conversations I rehearsed and then abandoned because they felt performative. How do I tell Miguel? I asked myself. Does Elena need everything? The questions multiplied in my chest. I practiced a few phrases in the mirror until they fit like clothing. I have been violated. I have evidence. I will not be silent. The words felt both heavy and strangely liberating. I visited the bank during a lunch hour, careful and mundane. I opened my account and transferred money in modest amounts that would not be noticed but would build a buffer. Each deposit felt like reclaiming a fraction of the life that had been assumed. I kept a small notebook with deposit numbers, receipts, and dates. The ledger was my scaffolding. At home I became an archivist of my own life. Files labeled evidence and notes multiplied on my computer. Printed copies sat in 3 envelopes in 3 different places, like a woman who had learned the value of redundancy from years of working with fragile hearts in hospital wards. I backed up photos on a tiny encrypted drive and placed another copy with Irene. There were nights I could not stop the replaying. I would lie awake and see his face illuminated by the phone screen and then the ripple of faces in the group chat, and a mean arithmetic would start: how many had seen, how many had commented, how many had forwarded. It was like counting losses, and the counting did something to me. It turned emotion into measure. In the quiet hours my thoughts grew practical and cold. If this was going to be a fight, then evidence mattered. The lawyer had made that clear. Names, timestamps, backups, the smallest detail might tilt a case in a courtroom or in a courtroom of public opinion. I was not interested in spectacle. I was interested in protection and truth. The children were a delicate matter. I asked Miguel to come over under some mundane pretext and then, once he was there, told him what had happened. He sat very still, hands folded, like someone learning a new map language. He did not ask questions filled with drama. He asked how he could help. That was Miguel's way: practical concern, immediate action. Elena wept once and then became steel. We knew things were off, she said in a voice that betrayed more than she let on. We didn't know it was this. The admission was a small truce. There were moments of shame that no evidence could erase. When I saw an old friend in the market, she asked, "Everything okay at home?" and I could have said nothing or something purchased. I said, "No. But I am handling it." The truth felt protective, like a coat. The word handling was both armor and understatement. I began to make lists of what I would not accept anymore. A casual invasion of privacy, jokes at my expense, the diminution of my worth by someone who should have known better. The lists were short and sharp. I repeated them like liturgies. I started to use other small muscles I had not exercised in a long time. I said no to certain requests, declined errands that felt like obligations without reciprocity. Each refusal was an asserting of boundary. A memory returned one night in a flash, the night he asked me to take new pictures years ago and I'd refused. The refusal had left a small crack. I clipped a fern back in the garden and admired the clean line of the cut. I laughed once at a silly television show and found the sound genuine. I cooked a meal and ate it standing up, because for the first time in a while I had tasted food the way you taste verdicts, with attention. I thought about asking for apologies but then decided I did not need them for the purpose of my healing. Apologies are for the guilty to recover. What I needed was recognition and restitution. I wanted him to understand what had been torn, and then I wanted him to live with the consequences. That was the center of justice for me. There were practical concerns that had to be tended to with a steady hand. I scheduled a meeting with the lawyer to file a complaint for dissemination of intimate images and to prepare divorce papers. The lawyer's face read my files like someone reading the weather report, alarms and necessary provisions. "You're doing well. The evidence is clear," she said, a sentence that landed like a small rain over a parched field. I still felt fear. Fear is a faithful companion. It does not vanish with paperwork. It visits, insists on small routines, but it is not all of me. I learned to sit with it. I learned that courage and fear are often sitting at the same table, not enemies but complicated neighbors. I also had to think about the children's perception. I wanted them to know my boundaries without forcing them into a position of jury. So I spoke plainly but without spectacle. I asked for discretion and tenderness. They responded with a kind of fierce protectiveness that still humbles me. One afternoon, when the house was quiet and the jasmine outside the gate was warm with sun, Raúl called. I let it ring. When he left a message, a voice thick with embarrassment, I listened in the privacy of my kitchen. He wanted to see me, to apologize, to negotiate. I listened and then deleted the message. I kept the printouts and the backups. I had a life to reconstruct. In moments alone, I rehearsed the possibility of forgiveness. Forgiveness is an ocean and not a footbath. It is not a favor to be manufactured on demand. I could not give that yet. I had to walk the practical route first: safety, autonomy, dignity. If forgiveness ever came, it would be because the harm had been reckoned with and not because I had been tired. I started to make small plans for joy. Irene and I penciled in a trip to Oaxaca months from now, a little light for a future that I could now imagine. The thought of it made my heart lurch in a way that felt like breathing again. The idea of planning something for me was revolutionary in its own quiet way. The world did not change in a day. People continued their errands, neighbors still argued about parking spots, the twins still demanded ice cream. But my interior weather had shifted, and with it the way I moved through the world. I was present and watchful. I was methodical and, sometimes, unexpectedly light. I recorded everything in my notebook like an officer logging patrols, dates, names, actions taken. The list grew into a map of my life's current coordinates. It was messy and human and necessary. The ledger was both a record and a promise. I stayed silent, but I didn't forget. The phrase had become a drumbeat I kept in my chest, a reminder that silence had run out of patience and was now a strategy rather than resignation. I would speak when it mattered, with witness and law and careful feet. The decision was no longer an idea, it was embodied in actions: the lawyer appointment, the bank account, the envelope tucked under the sink. These were small acts of rebellion, domestic and dignified. They were the work of a woman learning that you can reconstruct dignity as methodical work, not as drama. At night I would often stand at the window and watch the street's small lights flicker. Sometimes a cat would pass, indifferent. Sometimes a neighbor would clap in the distance. Life continues. People keep living in it. That is what terrified me and what steadied me, the continuity of ordinary days that must be lived with more truth. I had been a nurse for so long that much of my instinct leaned toward healing. Now, I applied that same careful expertise to myself. I documented wounds, cleaned them, set them with legal and practical splints, and prepared them to heal less painfully than the first time they had been allowed to break. Healing would not be instant. It would be a slow stitch. When I finally slept properly, it felt like a short exile. I woke clearer, as if the cords that had bound rumor and doubt had loosened a little. There was pain still. There would be courtrooms and hard conversations, perhaps irrevocable shifts in family geometry. But there was also a direction, forward. In the moments when the fear pressed hard, would take out the yellow envelope and read the note I had written to myself. "You did not deserve this," it began, and the words were both balm and command. They told me, again and again, to act like the person I had been trained to be, measured, brave, precise. I would not let his joke be the final definition of my life. I would not let that group thread become the last word spoken about decades of being someone's partner, mother, worker, nurse. I was reclaiming my story, one careful move at a time. The next steps would demand steadiness and patience and an unwillingness to be drawn into melodrama. There would be uncomfortable confrontations and, likely, calculations by those who thought scandal would protect them. But muddled intentions or not, the record was growing clear. I learned then that anger and dignity can coexist. Anger gave me velocity, dignity gave me direction. Together they became a kind of engine. I stayed silent, but I didn't forget. And with that neither did I stop planning. The week after I decided, my days became a sequence of small, deliberate motions. I moved like someone who had to sew a wound shut with careful stitches, one action, one proof, one safe place. I felt steadier with each tiny, sensible thing I did. I went to the lawyer with the envelope of prints in my bag in my hands that still shook a little. She spread the pages on her desk, black and white like evidence in a crime drama, and read them with her chin tucked. Her voice was practical, almost tender. "We file for dissemination of intimate images and prepare divorce papers. Preserve everything electronically. Don't reply." That instruction felt like an anchor. I wrote down the steps in a small notebook: date, time, contact, file name, and the act of listing made the fear smaller. I felt the strange warmth of control creep back into my chest. At the bank I opened an account with my nurse's ID and a wordless, professional calm. The teller stamped forms while the fluorescent light hummed above us, the sound steady and anonymous. I transferred small amounts first, then a larger sum, an invisible thread being rewound into my name. I made copies of every screenshot, every cruel joke, every "it's my property" message. I learned about metadata and timestamps and learned how to explain them aloud without crying. Knowledge was another kind of medicine, cold and effective. I put a copy of the envelope under the sink, wrapped in a plastic bag and tucked behind dishwasher soap. It seemed almost silly hiding my truth next to sponges, but ordinary places are the best hiding places for extraordinary things. I smiled at the domestic absurdity and felt my old competence return. If I could keep a patient alive, I could keep a document safe. I called Alejandro and held the line while he translated shame into confession. He didn't defend him. He lowered his voice and confirmed things I did not want to hear but needed to know. "You were not the only one," he said, then, as if apologizing to the floor, I tried to stop him. I told Miguel and Elena in separate rooms, each conversation small and heavy. Miguel sat like a block of wood and asked immediate, practical questions: "How can I help?" And for once I let him help. Elena cried and then became steady in a way that felt almost adult. "We're with you, Mom," she said, and the phrase steadied bones. I practiced what I would say in the restaurant in front of the bathroom mirror. I shaped sentences that were calm and factual. I rehearsed pauses so they would not become sobs. The mirror showed a woman who had learned to translate outrage into words. There were quieter precautions. Passwords changed, cameras checked, mail slut. A cousin sent a message implying I should keep the family together, as if my body were an object a social harmony required. I smiled and answered neither advice nor insult. KLI, but I did not forget. I waited for the moment that made public the private cruelty, the conversation that would force him to account. On a gray Thursday I reserved the corner table, the same place where he had once asked me to marry him. I sat with the prince and the letter and my lawyer's quiet encouragement folded into my pocket. When he arrived, he carried an old casualness like a coat that didn't belong to him anymore. I tapped the envelope as if it were a time bomb set to reveal all the lies. I would make him look at what he had done. But first he had to be there to see it. And he came. The restaurant smelled of lemon oil and slow-cooked meat. The lights were low, the tablecloth was the old white that hides stains. It was intimate in the way of things that once contained joy and now might contain truth. He smiled when he saw me, an automatic smile, the one that had wrapped around 30 years of mornings. He sat as if the seat had been reserved for him because it had been, for so long. He ordered for us in quick, practiced motions, and the server poured wine that I did not want. "Are you all right?" he asked, a little too bright. I set the prince between us like a knife, crisp, black and white, undeniable. His laugh was small, his fingers twitched as if for a touch that was not invited. "Do you see this?" I asked, and my voice was steady enough to break a silence. He leaned forward as if he did not understand the danger in leaning. He read a line and then another, the color draining slow from his face. At first he tried the old defenses, jokes, minimization, gaslight dressed as nostalgia. "This is nothing, Lucía. Old photos. People are cruel online." Cruel, yes. But not anonymous, and not from him. I watched him fumble for ownership without shame. "You people make a fuss," he said, as if my life were a nuisance he'd never properly cleared. He reached for my hand on the table. I pulled away as if from heat. Alejandro's message, his plea to remove the pictures, had been there on the screen like a single, clean witness. I read it aloud to him, then the replies, the laughs, the emoji that punctuated humiliation. He tried to laugh and then to justify, and then to threaten. Each stage was a small revealing of character. "You called them your property," I said, and the words landed like stones. He bristled. "I didn't mean it like that." Excuses are weightless in a place where paper proves the heavy truth. I laid out the consequences, documented emails, printed shares, names of men who commented. I described a legal path that would be slow and precise and likely humiliating for him in ways he had refused to understand. I offered two choices: discreet divorce now, with terms reflecting the evidence, or litigation that would make his behavior public. He laughed one last time, a thin and brittle sound. "You can't ruin me. Think of the children, Lucía." His voice tried to recover the old argument as if money and reputation could buy forgiveness. But reputations built on the small thefts of another's dignity are poor currency. A man at the next table looked up, a server paused. The world of other people, perfectly ordinary, gathered ears. He started to raise his voice, old habit, old power, until I named, calmly and plainly, what he had done. The naming rearranged the room. Shame is contagious when admitted and unmistakable when documented. "You have 3 days, I said. 3 days to accept a fair division, to keep this private, to let me walk away with dignity. Otherwise I will file everything." It was a surgical offer, stripped of drama. I wanted a settlement, not a spectacle. I wanted him to understand there were costs to being cruel and that I was no longer inventory. He reached for his phone and cursed at the weight of what he had created. "I have friends, clients, this will ruin me," he said, a different panic from the earlier bravado. No one flinched from the truth he'd already shown. His audience was smaller now and less forgiving. He begged for time, apologies, promises. "I'll fix it," he said, like a carpenter promising to mend wood. Fixing things would not bring back privacy or undo the ritual of sharing, but he offered it anyway. I had already learned that apologies are often for the comfort of the speaker, not the repair of harm. I left the bill on the table and stood. He called me 1,000 names I did not recognize anymore, the last true sounds of a life that had been built on my silence. I walked out into the night with my head straight and the envelope under my arm. Outside, the air felt like a cleansing. Cars murmured, a dog barked in the distance, a woman carried groceries. The ordinary continued. I let him call to me, voice cracking, and I did not go back to answer. That night he called the house and left a message full of bargaining. I listened and then deleted it, keeping a copy saved in a legal folder. I followed the lawyer's advice about record keeping down to the letter. The work was mechanical, like dressing a wound, unpleasant, necessary, precise. He attempted other maneuvers. A message to Miguel that tried to cast me as the instigator. A whispered conversation with a cousin meant to rally sympathies. A frantic call to his boss where he minimized everything as a private matter. Each move was predictable, each left traces. My children responded differently when they learned the details. Miguel protective, Elena steady and furious. They did not broadcast my shame, they guarded it. They set boundaries with him in ways I'd been unable to. Their support was not a rescue, it was a recognition. That changed everything between us. Raúl chose to accept the terms in the end. He feared the business consequences more than he feared the moral ones. In those calculations, truth becomes a ledger. The lawyer filed papers. We agreed on a quiet separation and the transfer of keys. I packed a few boxes in the quiet hours before dawn and moved to a small apartment near the park. It was modest, 2 rooms, a small kitchen, sun that came in the mornings, and it felt like space to breathe. I carried only what I needed and the envelope I had tucked beneath the sink. I slept that first night in a bed that was mine alone and woke to sunlight that had no history with his hands. The world had not imploded, it had rearranged. There was grief. There was relief. There was new air in my lungs. What came next would be quieter and harder than the drama of confrontation. There would be townspeople's whispers and the awkward silences at family events. But the shape of my days had changed. And the next step was to live into it. 6 months later, my mornings begin with sunlight on the floorboards and the smell of coffee made properly, not in a hurry. I walk to the little clinic where I volunteer 2 mornings a week and carry my stethoscope like an old friend. The work is useful and humbling and keeps me honest. The apartment is small, but the books fit and the windows open to the park where children run and old men play chess. Miguel brings the twins some weekends, Elena comes with her baby, and we make tamales together and sit in the kitchen like the women we always were. Their acceptance is quiet protection. It is the thing that softens the hard edges of what happened. People in the neighborhood still lean into gossip, but many simply nod politely and continue their lives. Once, a neighbor I had known for years said aloud, "Sometimes things are necessary," as if she did not know the depths of what that meant. I smiled and said, "Yes. Sometimes." I have started to plan small pleasures that are mine alone. Irene and I have penciled in a trip to Oaxaca for later in the year. It is a small rebellion of color and mole and markets. When I close my eyes, I see the clay tiles and think, there is a future beyond this wound. My work keeps me connected to a kind of purpose that no humiliation can strip away. There is a dignity in helping someone stitch themselves up, in watching a child's fever break, in the small confidential ways care is given. I measure my worth in acts, not in the words of men. Raúl called once, 6 weeks ago. His voice was smaller. I will tell you the truth plainly. I am tired and better and alive. I miss certain memories and I refuse others. I am careful and I am brave because I have been forced to learn both. My hair grays in the sun and my hands are still strong. Thank you for staying with my story. If you have lived something like this, tell me what city or country are you from? Share your voice below, it matters. Subscribe if these stories matter to you and help us reach others who need to hear that they are not alone. Would you ever stay silent to protect a family, or would you say, enough?